Devil's Den is one of the most prehistoric underground spring, which is located just 2 hours north of Orlando in Williston, Florida. The Devil's Den is a spring located inside a cave. It is also the fact that there have been multiple people who have sadly died there, and sometimes under somewhat completely mysterious circumstances. There is a dark side to this cave, which is why it's called the Devil's Den. It did not turn out to be a portal to hell in quite the way its early observers thought. However, it has claimed multiple lives. The very first reported news about the infamous Devil's Den came in 1990. There are only a few records that exist today that describe the event in detail, and one of which was a newspaper article that was eventually never published. But the event took place on Sunday, October 7, 1990. It involved 3 scuba divers, and strangely enough, only their initials have been given. The initials were CP, KK, and CM, which is why unfortunately there is not any kind of personal information to be found on these divers. No one for sure knows where these 3 divers came from and whether or not we will ever get information about them and what their lives were like before embarking on the dangerous Devil's Den. But there are a few guesses that CP might have been the most experienced diver and the leader of the group of 3. It has been reported that CP, the certified diver, had been to the site for a dive once before, just 2 weeks earlier. CP was also rescue certified. This isn't as reassuring as it might sound. And according to several newspapers, at that time, CP was the only one who was rescue certified for the open water, but he was not approved for caves or for caverns. And in addition to already having visited the site previously after being rescue certified, CP was also the only diver out of the 3 who chose to bring an additional set of air tanks. Later on, when the group first arrived at the cave around noon that day, all 3 of them did a dive together. Now, basing this on the timeline, it was a pretty long dive as well, and it all went incredibly well. Depending on how far down you dive, scuba tanks may last well over an hour without running out of air. It is also possible that the group got close to reaching that timestamp, which is not so strange because there is a lot to see in this cave, and it's absolutely gorgeous underwater since it's the home to a lot of fish and turtles. Moreover, the rock formations in this expansive pool seem virtually endless from a swimmer's eye view. The Devil's Cave goes down to about 50 feet and gets as wide as 200 feet for an underwater space full of different rock formations that has constituted a lot of possible exploring for divers and explorers. Also, there are both expansive underground caverns and exceedingly narrow passageways, which divers commonly call swim-throughs. These are often so tight that divers have to squeeze through one at a time. In addition to lots of diving as well as exploring, this also constitutes a lot of opportunities for groups to get widely separated from each other. So after enjoying a thorough exploration, all 3 successfully re-emerged from the water, took off their masks, and regrouped. Now, basing this again on the timeline, it looks like the group took a short break at this point. It would have been sometime between 1 and 2 p.m., so even without knowing their identities, one can easily imagine. Then, at around 2:15 p.m., CP allegedly decided not only to return to the cave, but to go for another dive. The other 2 members of the divers group could not join CP as they had no air tanks left. CP went into the Devil's Den again, and that was the last time his friends would see him alive. Now, since their previous dive was relatively long, and since scuba dives generally take at least a half hour or so, it took some time before the other 2 divers got really worried. And when CP never resurfaced, the 2 friends called 911. And tragically, because there were no air tanks left, CC and KK were unable to try and look for their friend themselves, and they couldn't do anything else than wait for help. By the time rescue crews arrived, things were looking really grim. There was still no sign of CP, and searching an underwater world such as the one in the Devil's Den is an unusual and artistic process. The search has been reported to have lasted for hours, especially considering where it was that the lost diver was found. The experienced and certified cave diver was at the very, very bottom of the cave. In fact, he was stuck in a slit on the bottom of the cave. The prevailing theory appears to have been that this obscured his vision, causing CP to get turned around and end up stuck in 2 large walls which were very close together. Where CP was found, it was only 2 feet high, so all the more narrow when you're wearing scuba gear. The rescue crew found what was described as clawing marks on the wall, what might confirm he couldn't get himself loose. Unfortunately, there's not more information on this, but this marked a dark and decisive shift in the attitude which surrounded this fabled and scary scuba site at the time. But some new to public awareness today, there are a few warning signs inside Devil's Den that are almost shocking in how direct it is. It simply advises all its divers from swimming any further and features a picture of the Grim Reaper scythe in hand. The sign has also described how more than 300 divers have died in dangerous underwater caves just like this one. It also warns that it can happen to you. Lastly, it is also said now with spine-tickling intensity that there is nothing in this cave worth dying for. Probably the best way to describe how mind-blowing the dangerous Devil's Den cave is to see it in person, and why it earned itself the name Devil's Den is to revisit the experience of the early settlers from the 1800s. And apparently the settlers had named it in the 18th century long before they actually looked inside it. And once they peered over the edge of the hole, instead of seeing the orange glow of Satan's kingdom, they saw blue water, which was so clear that they probably did not even know it at the time they were actually looking at an underground river. There is a river that is so old it turned out to be full of prehistoric fossils, including saber-toothed tigers, mastodons, camels, and even human remains dating back more than 7,000 years. In the early 1970s, scuba diving suddenly became super popular. Many scuba enthusiasts had realized that this hellhole was no hellhole at all, but that the Devil's Den was a fantastic place to go scuba diving. But then, eventually, the property was purchased and then turned into a site designated for recreational scuba diving and scuba training. Now, how true that it is an incredible a place as Devil's Den and worth visiting as countless people every year find it to be? It is not at all worth it to take any kind of risk here or push anywhere. Well, beyond one's qualifications, it is absolutely horrific that it should be where someone's life unexpectedly and abruptly ends, as it was indeed the case with KK, CM, and CP. It starts out as a place of wonder and a memorable experience among friends, then out of nowhere, one of those friends is gone forever. We may never know exactly what happened with CP, but we can also take note of this story and always keep in mind the dangers of exploring such alien environments. What are your thoughts on this? Let us know in the comments section down below. Thank you for watching this video. If you found it interesting, take a deep dive into the like and subscribe buttons. Let us know what you thought of it in the comments. See you again soon in another video, if you dare.